Welcome, classic rock fans, to another episode of New Album Review. Today's episode is concerning the new Johnny Marr album, which is called Call the Comet. As you would expect from an album of Johnny Marr, it's noticeable for its very intricate atmospheric guitar sound. In fact, one critic has described Johnny Marr as the preeminent guitar stylist of his generation, as well as, of course, being lauded by Noel Gallagher. I can't help but feel sometimes that the creative impetus is very much with Johnny Marr at the moment. So it seems to render the idea of a Smiths reunion ever more remote. I mean, why would you sort of link up with somebody you perhaps don't particularly want to keep the company of, just to do what exactly? To trade on nostalgia or something like that? This album, which I believe is his third solo album, is an exciting listen. It's tinged with that sort of post-80s melancholia, sort of the Prozac generation, if you like. But this album also deals with the sort of legacy of the Smiths, but actually goes way beyond it. But then why shouldn't he really deal with the legacy of the Smiths? I think the legacy is as much his as it is Morrissey's. And this album is very much a befitting follow-up to the Messenger album, which was a kind of wry sort of look at the more surreal aspects of modern life. In fact, Johnny Marr said of this record, and I'm quoting, "This time round I had to imagine a society rather than just report what I see." As regards inspiration, there's some H.G. Wells in there. I've been reading a lot of interesting stuff from the early 20th century. It's not quite utopian, but it's imagining a new kind of society, and that's how I felt going into the start of 2016. One thing I really like about this album is it has a kind of melodic impetus, which is reminiscent of sort of the Smiths at their very best, I think. You get those soaring choruses and ringing guitars, which provide the very fabric of this album. But there's something else to it. There's a kind of an atmospheric colouring. It's been described by one critic as a melancholic post-punk darkness and an innate sadness. But to me, that sombreness seems very northern, really, at its heart. A kind of a sense of longing to be elsewhere, sort of physically as well as perhaps psychologically. And in that respect, I'm very much reminded of sort of the very best of Ian Curtis. I think what made the Smiths special for me wasn't just Morrissey's very wry and dry, sardonic sort of lyrics. It was the sort of guitar phrasing and colouring of provided by Johnny Marr, of course. He has a distinctive sound. He certainly has a distinctive sound, which I think sets him apart from a lot of guitarists of his generation. In fact, I think it was summarised best by NME when they described him as, and I'm quoting, "Johnny Marr's flowery and kaleidoscopic guitar work, offset against the dour and foreboding musings of Morrissey, created that oddly obverse yet symbiotic dynamic that made the Smiths so essential." This album, very much like its predecessors, delves into a kind of imagined society, really, what NME calls a psychogeography. It's a very sort of backward-looking album, but very forward-looking album as well. It's to me, if somebody is constantly looking forwards or to the past, it seems to reveal a discontent where they actually are. And I think that's perhaps what Johnny Marr is telling us about society at the moment. If we think about some of the songs on this album, really, I can't really talk about artwork or anything like that because I've not actually got a physical copy of it. I've just had my Amazon download to listen to. The album opener, of course, is Rise. Interesting sort of phased vocals on it, really, which I quite enjoy. It's an immediately compelling song. It's been described as one critic as a sci-fi rock soundscape. The imperative in the song, "Hear the Truth," kind of sets the tone or sets a stall out for this album from the very beginning. Like a lot of songs on this album, it has a heart-rendering introspection. Once you sort of tap into that sort of current for a lot of the songs, they become almost quite overwhelming. I think I found them so anyway. In fact, one critic has written, the song has that brittle ice melancholic melody reminiscent of ABBA. So maybe there's some ABBA in its DNA, ABBA mixed with H.G. Wells. The Traces is another great one on this album. It has a strange sort of sound, very interesting bass sound. And the lyrics as well, it kind of reminds me of a marriage between Neil Young's After the Gold Rush and late 60s Stones. I realise that probably makes no sense at all. Hey Angel is also quite an interesting one as well. It has a kind of a T-Rex vibe to it, a sort of glam bombast, if you like, mixed with a sort of Britpop swagger. There's something else to it, though. I mean, it's can only kind of describe it as a sort of has sort of psychedelic textures tinged with a sort of a northern realism, all that kind of is sort of brought together in this stew that is this song. Hi Hello is a great one as well. It's probably the most Smith sounding song on this record, but it's one that's tinged with influences, and you can hear sort of strains of sort of Patti Smith, I think Leonard Cohen, but it also has an icy remoteness really that, you know, you'd get from kind of Bowie's sort of Berlin phase. It aches with a kind of a dissatisfaction psychologically as well as culturally. What is distinctive about this record is it goes way beyond the sort of merging influences that have obviously informed it. A kind of cross-pollination that exceeds the sort of paradigms of any labels you could throw at this record. I mean, in fact, if you were to call it, you know, Britpop, New Wave, none of them seem to do it justice. I mean, the Mancunian post-punk vibe that it has, it's, you know, it's, I think that the best label for it is it's definitely Johnny Marr. For me, one of the standout tracks on this album is Walk Into the Sea. It has a very intricate sort of guitar sound at the beginning, which isn't overstated in any way, and then you get the drum that sort of gently rises. It's a haunting piece of introspective writing, really. A song suited for a chilly January morning. It has an ambience and sort of evocative textures on this song, as he seems to sing of escape with the lyric, stumble and glide into the wide white tide. But there's lots of great stuff going on this album. You get that sort of electric noir of New Dominions, a sort of psychedelia meets krautrock with actor attractor. There's loads of stuff going on, this sort of merging of influences and this whole sort of mishmash of brilliance, which is Johnny Marr's manifesto, I think. There's no doubt about it that Call the Comet has a kind of dystopian flavour. It's like we living in the blaze of the election of Donald Trump and all sorts of stuff that's been going on that certainly has impacted upon Johnny Marr's writing. There are sort of references to sort of bleak dystopian possibilities, which are also being, I think, presented. He references his own upbringing in, which probably reflected mine in many respects, kind of a nuclear-fueled paranoia, Cold War, political, ideological strife and struggle that was going on at the time. You certainly get this impression from this album that he feels that's kind of where we're going back to. We get the song My Eternal, of course, which has a sort of visceral quality to it. It's it talks about the transformative force that music can be, which strikes me as rather naive, if not perhaps a little bit cliched. But it's like one of those haunting sort of synth romances we used to get in the 1980s. Johnny Marr, aka Tears for Fears. Spiral Cities is also quite interesting. It's about seems to be about an architectural sort of landscape shaped by musical structure. In fact, NME has said that it's a man searching for hope through sensory overload of urban life. New Dominions, of course, as I've said, is a piece of electric noir, perhaps a little bit reminiscent of Depeche Mode. All these influences sort of are coming together on this album, but they don't overwhelm it. They don't allow it to drift into parody in any way. They just elevate it to allow it to be as brilliant as it can be. And finally, we get the song A Different Gun, which closes the album. We're struck by its sort of melody and its energy, but we don't get any sort of... the ending is very understated in many respects. There's no huge crescendo. There's no day in the life moment here. All we get is a beautiful sung piece, beautifully textured. And all these subtleties sort of all contribute to this remarkable canvas that is this album. And if all these songs were to come together and we were to find any kind of meaning or catharsis in the individual brushstrokes, and I think this is the song which marks the signing off of this album as a fait accompli, I guess. Anyway, they're my thoughts on this album. I've jotted down some notes on, after a couple of listens. I'd be interested to know what you think of it. He's touring at the moment. He's just announced some tour dates, so by all means go. I apologise if anywhere on this vlog I've referred to Johnny Marr as Andrew Marr as a slip of the tongue, so you'll have to forgive me for that. Anyway, please click like, subscribe, check out the Facebook page, but more importantly, please do keep listening.